Okay, part two in our tracking and collision videos. This one's going to show you how to set up collision detection and allow the sprites that are turrets or whatever you're using to search for a target in multiple enemies are available. Okay, because at the minute both turrets just automatically shoot at the same thing. Okay, you only need one turret shooting, but let's set up collision detection first. Right, when we're doing collision detection, we need to set a property of the sprites that we want to collide. So I'm in the bullet sprite here, so I'm going to say collision active equals true, and I need to do the same for my enemy. Enemy sprite s.collision active equals true. Okay. The other thing I'm going to do is when I start in my turret, when I track a sprite, I want to stay with that sprite until I've killed it or until it's destroyed. Okay. And we'll work all that out when we do the collision logic. So I'm going to need to record information about what sprite I'm tracking. Now I'm going to do that in a special thing called associations, and I'm going to add a dummy value to start with. Okay, so it's s.associations. The enemies are also going to know that they're being tracked. Okay, and we can do that so that we don't double lock onto enemy targets, and so we'll do it using the same system. So we'll add a dummy value to the sprite association for the enemy. So I've added s.associations.add null to enemy and to my turret. Okay. Right, so I've got collision active in my enemy, and I've got, scrolling down to my bullet, collision active in my bullet. Now I also need to set a primary, okay, a collision primary, and I'm going to set that on the bullet. So it's going to be the bullet that's in charge of looking for sprites to collide with, okay, and the enemy is just available to collide with. And I'm going to do this by creating a collision handler, and this is the simplest type of collision we can do. There are loads of other complicated ones, but this will get you by with most things. And I'm going to call this, what should we call it? Bullet, let's call it bullet hit, because that's what it will be. Okay, so we're going to create this little collision handler now, just below our bullet sprite. So say void bullet hit. Don't do that. And this needs two parameters. The sprite that is the collision primary, so this will be our bullet sprite, and the sprite that we hit. So I'm going to call it collided with. Okay. So this little subroutine is going to take care of this. Now, I might in the future have lots of different types of sprites, and there might need to be different things happen. Okay, depending on what type of sprite it is. I know I've only got enemies in this one, but I'm going to set up the system that will allow me to track. So I'm going to say, let's have a look at the one I collided with. What type is it? I'm creating a switch, and I'm going to say if the sprite type is enemy, then do the following actions. Okay, that's all I'm doing there. So what I want to do is I want to kill the bullet, so I'm going to say bullet dot kill, and I want to kill the sprite I collided with. So I collided with, not colluded, kill. But I'm going to do some other things as well. Okay. And we'll come back to that. But let's just see if this works to start with. It should just work on the little demo we've got. So that block, as soon as a bullet hits it, it should get destroyed. one of them manages to hit it. Well, they're tracking it. They're not tracking it very quick. Rogue bullet got it. Okay, so he got killed, and the bullet killed. Right, let's have a look at the targeting system. Little bit naff at the minute. This is the thing we've got at the minute. It just says, right, for when the turret runs this, it says, get me the first enemy, and then rotate towards it in the direction. Let's alter the rotation speed back down to 1 as well. Alright, well, fair enough. We could do this, but what we ought to do is, if we've what will this do is target an enemy every single time. Okay, we've only got one at the minute, but if we're already tracking an enemy, we don't want to stop looking at that one and look for another one. So we're going to put some logic in here to keep track of the sprite that we're targeting, and if that sprite's gone, what we can then do is say, well, we'll look for another one then. Alright, so in order to make this a little bit more realistic, if we scroll up to where I created my enemy, what I'm going to put in is a loop. I'm just going to create 10 of them, and that's a standard way of making a loop happen 10 times. Okay, so I'm going to run the subroutine enemy 10 times. Remember, it used random numbers to generate the positions and the speeds of the enemies. So let's just run that just to make sure that that's working. So we should have 10 of them on screen now. And they go, they are getting killed, all the bullets are finding them and killing them. Okay, but we are tracking just one of those sprites. There's a lot of crossfire there going on that eventually is killing all the other ones. So they're both targeting that one that's just gone off screen. Oh, you got killed in the crossfire. And they are, they've all gone. Right, so we don't want that behaviour. So if we look to our targeting system, what we've got to do is we want to store the sprite that we're going to target. Okay, but looking for the first one is going to be no good, so I'm just going to comment that out because I don't want that. Okay, now I'm going to store it in that association, so I'm going to do a check first. So I'm going to say if turret dot associations naught equals null, then what I'm going to do is I'm going to look for a suitable target. I'm just putting a little comment in for me there. What I'll do after that, I'm going to say, instead of this, I'm going to say sprite enemy equals whatever I've got in my association. So I'm going to say it's a sprite turret dot associations naught. Okay, because that's where I'm going to store the sprite that I'm tracking. If I haven't got a sprite in there, then this value will be null, and so we won't try and rotate towards it. Okay, right, in order to find a suitable target, we need to loop through all the sprites in the sprite list. This is one way of doing it, but that's the one we're going to do. Okay, so we're going to say targets for every sprite that's a target in the engine manager sprite list. That it gives me access to every sprite that exists. Okay, currently it's currently active. Right, and we've got bullets running here, so we need to be dead careful that we don't try and target a bullet. So we need to look at our target. Well, let's rename that to target. If we look at its type, and that type is an enemy, yeah, then we're more interested. What we also need to see is this enemy currently being tracked, and we're going to set that up in a sec. Right, so the association for the enemy, the target sprite, is going to be the turret that's shooting at it and trying to turn towards it. Okay, So if it's an enemy and it's got no one shooting at it, that's a good target to pick up. Okay, so if we are in that position, we're going to say target.associations not equals the turret, this turret that's now tracking it. And we're also going to store in the turret, dot associations equals the target. So the turret has now got a record of what it's targeting, and the target knows who's targeting it. Okay, so you can see where I've got a lock on from if we wanted to put some logic in for the little square blobs. Okay, so once we've done that, this loop will continue to loop round. Now we don't want to look at it anymore, so we're going to put break in there, and that then highlights your for each loop. And what that says is saying, right, finish the loop and stop. So we'll drop out to this line here, where we can see if we picked anything up. Okay, what we must do when we kill a sprite, we must get rid of the association for the turret. So let's go down to our collision, our bullet hit. So we need to say we need to get hold of the sprite that's targeting this enemy that's just been got. So we can say sprite turret equals the sprite from the associations okay, so that's just going to get from the enemy sprite, the one we collided with, who was tracking you, if anybody. And if someone was tracking you, so if turret is not equal to null, so like someone was tracking, then what we need to do is make sure that the turret is no longer tracking that sprite. Otherwise it won't look for a new victim. Okay, so let's just look at what we've got again. So in our find target routine, which previously just looked for the first enemy sprite, we're now saying if we're tracking something, because that's what turret.associations is for, if we're not tracking something, look for a sprite. So look through all the sprites in the sprite list. If they're an enemy and they're not being tracked, then we'll have that one, thank you very much. So tell the enemy that it's being tracked by this turret, and to let the turret know that it's tracking this enemy. Okay, and then we come out of that loop, and then this is just the other code that we had before, where we're just saying, right, the enemy sprite that we're trying to turn towards is whatever we've got associated. If we haven't got anything associated, then don't turn towards it. And the only other thing we need to make sure we do is in the, well, we have got one more thing, but in the collision handler, when we kill one of the enemies, which is what this line does, we just check to see if there was a turret tracking that enemy. Okay, because it might got hit by a stray bullet anyway, and if there is, we tell that turret that it's not tracking anything, so that it can use the logic and pick up a new victim. Okay, right, so we've got, just to double check, we've got an association dummy set up, so that'll set up our association knot in both the enemy and the turret. So fingers crossed, let's run this and see if it actually works. I'll be amazed if it does. It's bound to have some stupid error in it. Right, so we are tracking, and they seem to be pointing at different directions, but it's difficult to tell, isn't it? Okay. And they're shooting all the time as well, which is a bit, why they're shooting now, that's a waste of bullets. So let's put a little bit of logic in the shoot code. So here's our shoot code. Okay, so what we can do this time, we can say if turret.associations no is not equal to null, if we're tracking a sprite, go for it, shoot like crazy, mate. Otherwise we don't. Just watch the effect of that, and then we'll try and make it a little bit more obvious which one we're targeting. So when we're down to 1, only one of those turrets will be allowed to target. So we're going to get down to that in a minute. Right. So only one of them's shooting now. Or is he going to get it? Oh. Oh. It's going to have to be a stray bullet job. No, not that way around, it's not. I'll get him on spray bullet now. Oh. Just give him. I'll give him another few seconds, and I won't. It's demonstrated what I want to demonstrate. He's got him. Okay, so they're not associated with any enemies, so they're not tracking anything, so they stop shooting. Right. Let's just make it a little bit more obvious which one we're shooting. And again, loads of ways to do this, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to flash the enemy once it's been targeted. So I'm going to go back to the enemy code and I'm going to make sure that the timer system's turned on, is initialized. Okay, and then in my targeting code, my find target, where I set up and find a target and set my associations, what I'm also going to do to the target, I'm going to make it flash continuously. And then you'll be able to see. So I'm going to say stay on half a second off for 0.2 of a second, so it'll flash on. So the one that we're targeting should flash, so you should be able to see that in a minute when we run it. So there's some that are flashing. There you go. Oh, dispatching them quite well. Yes, got him with a rogue bullet. Okay, now I could make loads more enemies dead easy, so I could put 50 on there, and I can create some more turrets if I want, because all the code's in place. So I'm going to put a turret at the top right of the screen, and I'm going to put one bang in the centre. Okay, the shooting speeds, I'm going to make some of slower bullets, I think. I'm going to 150 and have some really slow bullets, 100. Right, see what that looks like. So all the logic's there, and I can just keep adding turrets because the logic is tied to a turret. So I've got 4 independently tracking turrets now that are working on their own. Perfect for if you're doing some sort of tower defense game. See, there's only one sprite left, so only one is targeting. He's got very slow bullets. You might get him on the spread. See how the bullets are disappearing as well after 4 seconds. Oh, he's got to get him now. Oh, can't believe it. Just missed. Okay, so that's targeting sprites. Got him. Oh! Surely. Yeah, there you go, he's dead. Okay,